I'm Rudy Mendoza-Denton, and I thank you all for being here today, for listening. I am going to request one thing of you, which is, in addition to the phones and putting it all down, and we all know that, just please put away your notebooks for a little while. There's nothing that I'm going to say that's particularly well crafted in terms of the spoken word. And I'd much rather that you take away the feeling and just the gist of what we are talking about. All right, yeah, let's go for it. So you know, Emiliana mentioned this bit about doctors who feel empathy towards their patients being like having better patient outcomes. And that finding is really true. But let's focus on instances where that breaks down. Let's focus for a minute on health disparities across outcomes. For example, black children relative to white children receive fewer dosages of pain-relieving analgesics relative to white children, right? And some of this becomes a calculus of an ambiguous situation where a doctor is saying, well, how much pain do you feel? How much is right for you, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much data about differential mortality rates as a function not only of access to life-saving surgery and care, but the decisions of doctors to provide that life-saving surgery and care. Some of that conversation is not only about access and economic disparity. Of course, that's an issue. But some of that has to do with the decisions of the caregivers as to whether to open up that door of access. And that's where we get that empathy. So you mentioned also that study by Batson and Darley in 1973 where Princeton Theological Seminary students, on their way to give a talk about the Good Samaritan, when they were told that they were late, literally walked over a person who was suffering. So there's all of these processes that are going on inside our heads that even when we have the best intentions, doctors go through the Hippocratic Oath, right? And people will swear, I treat everybody the same. All of us feel that way, and yet we are still in a space where we are subject, vulnerable, and at risk for treating people differently depending on the kinds of attributions that we make about them, the kinds of conclusions that we share about them. So for example, doctors will say, well, I don't know that I want to give that medicine to that person because they're not going to take it, because they're going to be late, they're going to abuse the medicine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those kinds of attributions are not equally distributed among patient groups. Similarly, when we are in a situation where we are going to offer empathy or support, there are processes that prevent us from treating people the same. There's a study by Gartner and DeVideo, also in the 70s, where they put people in different rooms, and there were intercoms in each of the rooms. So people could hear each other, but they thought that in one condition, they thought that other people could hear them through the intercom. In the other condition, they thought that they were by themselves, but they could hear everything that was going on. Turns out that somebody had a really bad accident, at least that they could hear, and that person was either black or white. In the condition where people thought that everybody else could hear them, their own actions, there was no difference in helping behavior, right? But in the condition where they thought that they were alone, there was a big difference between helping towards the white victim versus the black victim. And what was the narrative that people said? Well, there were other people who were listening and heard the study, so I just thought that it was, that I didn't need to do anything, right? The point is that may be true, but you see that difference anyway. So what's going on that makes us take that split-second decision whether to stop and to accept that empathy responsibility, is what I'm hearing from Emiliana today. And some of that has to do with this concept of the associations that we make, the split-second decisions that we make at an implicit or unconscious level. So this brings up this idea of implicit bias, right? We've all heard about this idea of implicit bias. It was front and center when Starbucks shut its stores down for the day and had all employees take that implicit bias training. It was, in fact, in the presidential elections, and yet many of us don't know quite what that is. What's implicit bias versus explicit bias? I've been working on this topic for close to 25 years now, so it's a thrill for me to know that it's part of the conversation. But it's not the same as outward prejudice. It has to do with sort of these inner currents of unconscious behavior, and it's not like Freudian and an interpretation of dreams kind of land. It's actually very basic to the way that we function every day in society. There's so much information that we have to contend with that we have to make certain shortcuts, and we have to make certain associations happen more automatically than others. So I brought some props to help us understand what implicit bias is, and that prop is on my body. So I want to ask you, the audience, what prop do you think is on my body, I am showing you, that could relate to implicit bias in some way? I need a hand. Yes, hi. My sport coat. Tell me about my sport coat. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. My socks. I know that you noticed my socks. I was like, I know that. Well, tell me about my socks. Okay. Whoa! You're playful, you're irreverent, right? So there's this funny combination of sort of professional, but you're making an attribution based on the color of my socks, which I should let you know. I kind of like I was early. I was like, yeah. Okay, sir. Tell me about the glasses. What does that communicate? Right, exactly, right? And so there's no prescription here. No, there is a prescription. Okay, so you understand what I'm trying to get at, which is that like automatically, right, almost without thinking, you're listening to my voice, but you've got this like, oh, the socks, playful. Oh, he's a scholar, et cetera, et cetera. There's a reason I dress this way. What if I had dressed like this, right? Of course, of course I'm making a joke or a point here, but if I had come dressed like that, there would be a different set of attributions that you're making, and you would be resolving it like, why is he dressed like that and coming up here to talk, being featured? I've had people say things like, well, he's really going to tell it like it is, kind of thing, right? And it's something that we're very talented at doing. I thought maybe by coming in like this, and I thought maybe that was a little too much. So we'll skip that. Okay. I need to stand here. So to tell you about implicit bias, it's important to go through a couple of activities, right? This first activity is something that you may have come across in your psychology, courses over, many years ago or maybe more recently. But it's called a Stroop test. And all that you have to do is tell me the color of the ink that you see on the screen. I guess in this particular case, it's pixels. So are we ready? I'm just going to show you some words. Just tell me the color of the ink. Are we ready? Okay? And I need us to do this relatively quickly. Okay, ready? Let's go.
Blue, red, green, orange, purple. Okay,
great. Okay, so somebody said green. Okay, I think I want to say, I apologize for people who may be colorblind or who may have difficulty. I recognize that that's the case, but for everybody, what you see is that was a fairly automatic response. Let's do it again. Let's just talk about the color of the ink. Are we ready? Okay, yep. Let's do this quickly.
Blue, red, green, yellow, purple.
Okay. So we see a little bit of laughter, a little bit of that sort of difficulty in suppressing that very well-learned response of reading words. It's a stimulus that draws us in. It's not like we were born reading. It's not like there's something innate about it, but it's such a well-learned response that the stimulus evokes the response, even though we are actively trying to suppress it, right? Where are we going with respect to bias in other people, right? Let's do this now, okay? I would like everybody, to the degree that you're able, please, to identify your left hand and your right hand. I mean left hand and right hand, of course. And if you could just put your hands on your lap, or if you could participate in some way, even without sound. But if I say the name of a flower, let's say I say rose, quickly, your left hand, right. Okay, if I say something positive, what's something positive? Sunshine. Sunshine, great, so sunshine, right? Okay, what's something negative? Hate is good, okay. Okay, mosquitoes might be another, except for maybe entomologists. Let's, okay. How about a bug?
Cockroach.
Fleas. Oh yeah, definitely fleas. Right hand. Okay. And negative, something negative. What did we say? What? Politics. War. Let's say war. Okay. 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 So I'm gonna cue you now through several words. I'm gonna say the word. You're also gonna see it on the screen. And again, if it's either a flower or it's a dual categorization task. If it's either a flower or something positive, just tap your left hand, sorry. And if it's a bug or a negative thing, you tap your right hand. Takes a little bit of practice, and people make mistakes. Are we ready? Okay?
Ready.
Let's try to be quick, because there's an accuracy speed trade-off. Ready? Okay. Rose, sunshine, disease, tulip, spider, war, carnation, pain, lily, joy, cockroach, moth, puppies, mosquito, Greater Good Science Center. Aha! Okay. Death, love. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you. So you see basically your reaction time, and that's what you do this is basically an implicit association test, which helps us understand the degree to which you have a facilitative or an enabling response between two categories. In this case, flowers and positive things sort of help each other out, and they are kind of grouped in the same category. Now let's change the task a little bit. So again, there's some practice effects here, but it's not. I guarantee you that it's not all. So left hand, flowers. So let's try again. Left hand, flowers and negative things. Right hand, bugs and positive things. So if I say cockroach, okay. If I say sunshine, if I say war, if I say carnation, okay. Let's do it again, just so you get a little bit more practice, okay. If I say tulip, if I say cold weather, maybe okay. If I say fleas, and if I say kittens, okay. Let's do this again. Are we ready? Okay. Let's go. Cockroach, puppies, sunshine, spider, disease, love, death, carnation, war, mosquito, joy, rose, pain, tulip, lily, moth. Okay. All right, so you heard everybody fidgeting, everybody laughing. That discomfort that you feel is the conflict between category memberships that are incompatible in one way or another with each other. And of course, everybody says, well, I had so much practice and I couldn't, quite do it. I guarantee you, we don't have time today, that if we switched it up, right, that if we did this second task the first time, you would be so relieved the second time because it was just so much easier, right? So what that tells us is that we have these categories that facilitate one another, right? That make it easier for us to respond in one way versus the other. And it has everything to do with the police person who decides that someone holding a wallet is in fact holding a gun, right? It has everything to do with the professor who hears the response to a question from a female versus a male science student and says, that's brilliant, versus, you know what, nah, kind of thing, right? And that's where implicit bias comes in. Investors prefer entrepreneurial ventures pitched by attractive men, right? This is in PNAS. It suggests that, as the title suggests, that when people are pitching the latest and greatest, app that they're going to build, if it's delivered by a man, and particularly by an attractive man, people are likely to think that it's genius. Female hurricanes are deadlier than male hurricanes. Wow. Okay? So as you know, hurricane names are, they go in order of the hurricane, right? When you control for the intensity of the hurricane, statistically, for the intensity of the hurricane and for whether it went through a rural or urban area, female hurricanes end up causing a whole lot more damage. Why is that? I need a hand, and then, yeah. They don't take female hurricanes as seriously, right? So you get Hurricane Amanda, I'll stay home, but Hurricane Victor, okay. So, so these are the kinds of behaviors that have implications. What happens when those categories are things like Juan, Jose, versus, things like John and James, right? Those are the category memberships, and those associations are what really matters. So the question is, what is it? I'm just going to, that's the end of my slides. Let me talk to you here. No, it's fine. I have 3 minutes left. Let me talk to you a little bit about about some of the ways that we can overcome these biases. I will tell you right now that what Starbucks, as beautiful as this activity is in helping us understand that we have implicit bias, as beautiful and important as the work of Starbucks in that day where they were shut down, that's not enough. In fact, it puts us at risk because we then say, well, now I know I'm good, right? And therefore, next time we go out, we feel that sense of moral, like we're morally clean, right? And so we're actually more at risk for being biased in those ways that we are not aware of, right? So you have awareness and you have mindfulness, et cetera, but there is nothing quite like, and this is where Emiliana previewed what I'm saying, intergroup contact. Meeting other people from other groups and humanizing them. Turns out that that Fast Friends procedure that you all went through, we did that in our lab across members of different groups. It was Latinx versus and white students who came together and went through that procedure. They showed that not only were they more able to see each other as human, but they actually began to see a little bit of that person's identities within themselves. What is it that drives the Fast Friends process? It's a process that's called inclusion of other in the self, right? Which means that you are somehow taking that person's identity, that person's being, that person's wishes and likes and sufferings, and you feel them just a little bit. That's a process of empathy. It's the reason why I sweat when my wife is giving a talk, right? And it turns out that you can do that across group boundaries, but there's no shortcuts. The effects of contact are actually quite minimal if you go and eat tacos in Mexico, right? And say, oh, I've met the natives, right? It's actually much more valuable if you bring people over to your house, if you develop friendships with them. It's a very human process, but it's also a very difficult process precisely because we have all these fears, precisely because we have all of these assumptions that we make implicit or otherwise, and instead we have to go right into the heart of that discomfort and slowly break it away. The good news is that we are really good at socializing. That's what makes us social creatures. So I'll stop there. Thank you.